this series. We're starting a new series today called Atheists for Jesus. That's our Lent series. Not exactly a typical Lent sermon series title. It's actually a phrase that comes from Richard Dawkins, the famous atheist. He wrote an essay entitled Atheists for Jesus, in which he said that, in his opinion, Jesus was ahead of his time ethically. And he believes in Darwinian evolution. And so Jesus was just ahead of his time somehow. And he says, in natural selection and the survival of the fittest framework, it just doesn't make sense for human beings to be altruistic, to be loving, to live with self-sacrificial love. He said somehow our brains have developed to the extent that we realize that's just better now in the long term. And so he thinks that the ethics of Jesus could be promoted. Dawkins obviously doesn't believe in God, but he thinks the ethics of Jesus could be promoted, and he suggests T-shirts that say "Atheists for Jesus," and that's where this title comes from. So we're exploring the life of Jesus for Lent. This is a church, and we're talking about Jesus. We're exploring the life of Jesus. It's funny when you have to say that. Sometimes, some people wonder sometimes, I guess, but we're exploring the life of Jesus, but we're doing it in a way that both believers and non-believers can appreciate, in a way that gives permission for people to express their questions and doubts, and for others as a form of worship, to understand Jesus better as we prepare for Easter. So a friend of mine came into town from San Diego, and he's an awesome friend for many reasons, but one of them is he scored free tickets to the Suns-Spurs game last night down at US Airways Arena. And so me and three other guys get to go, down and see this game, and the Spurs are just operating on all cylinders, by the way. It wasn't pretty if you're a Suns fan. We have a Spurs fan right over there, San Antonio, Texas, in the house. It was ugly last night. So the score is like 60-30 at halftime. But, they have halftime entertainment, right? So the halftime entertainment was a magician, and so you had a guy who's the magician and the female assistant. And they had 4 tricks that they did, just kind of separated out on the basketball court. The first one was really good. There was a curtain on top of a chair, and he pulled the curtain there, and there she was. It's cool. Everybody clapped. So the second trick they did out of the 4 was the one where, you have like this, it looks like a stack of black boxes, and she gets inside, and then he shoves the metal, it's supposed to be like razor or something, right through the box, and you're like, how did she survive, right? He opens it up, the big reveal. So he shoves all the razors, whatever they are, in the box, and then, some of the boxes rotate to where there's like one left, and you're like, she can't fit in there, so, ooh and ah. Well, the problem was you could see her hair hanging down out of the box. So somehow, it's amazing that she twisted her body into fit in this tiny space, but the trick failed because you could see her hair hanging down in front of 15,000 people in the arena. So everybody's like, oh! When you're supposed to go, ooh, it was just ah. And so her hair's hanging down. You feel terrible for it. If you're an empathetic person, you don't know whether to laugh or to feel really bad. So the next trick went really well, shoving swords through boxes. The last trick was, there was a wooden crate, wooden chest, on the floor. And he gets inside of it, and she stood on top of it and then raised a curtain around the wooden chest and her. You know what I'm talking about? And you've seen this trick before probably. After a few seconds, she's supposed to drop the curtain, and then he's on top of the box, and she somehow is gone. So that's not exactly what happened. She raised the curtain, and you don't know whether to laugh or feel bad. Or she raised the curtain. A couple of seconds later, you see what kind of looks like a male body coming out of the side of the wooden chest, and he apparently stepped on the curtain because the curtain fell. And so she caught it in midair, but it was far down enough to where you could see him on his knees looking up oh! And so this guy, poor guy, in front of 15,000 people, the trick bombs. There he is. So she raises it up again and then drops it, and there he is. Ta-da! And so you do what you can to recover. And then, poor thing, as that was their last trick, they walked away and she fell down on the court. Oh my gosh. So it was sympathy, applause, people appreciated the tricks that went well. So I'm thinking, as we're watching this halftime show, a magic show, of course, they're illusions, but you buy in, you suspend belief, and you want it to go well, because if it goes well, then you're able to continue suspending disbelief. That's what suspend disbelief, and enjoy the magic show. There are a growing number of people in our culture who view religion as a kind of failed magic show. Are you with me? Where maybe they were raised in environments where they were all in, and they believed everything the pastor said, and they thought church was going to be perfect, and they had all kind. They were vulnerable and open, and then they found out, wait a second, I don't know that I really agree with some of the beliefs that pastor taught. I don't know if that really holds water. Or something happened in the church, and they discovered that church people are not perfect people. And they were disappointed, and they were hurt. And so it could be only an intellectual issue with faith, or it could be only hurt and conflict, or it could be a combination of both. And it's like the curtain just falls for them on their faith, and they can see, oh, wait, it's like I see the wizard, behind the curtain operating the controls, and they feel, I can't believe anymore. Or, maybe they just have completely rejected the faith, or they're somewhere in between, and they're trying to make sense of reality and what really matters in this life, but they have all these old loops in their heads that have been given to them by, in their religious upbringing, and they're not sure how to make sense of it. Well, we're talking about that in this series, in the context of studying the life of Jesus. And today we're starting with what atheists or what Jesus and atheists have in common. What Jesus and atheists have in common. What Jesus says about organized religion is shocking to people who have never heard it. To people who have heard it, they probably don't appreciate the full impact of Jesus' words. Because, hey, we're in a church this morning. We are participating in organized religion. Since I'm the pastor, it looks more like disorganized religion, probably. But we're a part of something, and it's tough for us to look back through 2,000 years of history and appreciate the impact of what Jesus actually said and what his relationship with organized religion is. So, just going to make some observations first. The fastest growing group in religion surveys are those who have none. No religion, and they're referred to because of that as the nones, N-O-N-E-S. I think Frank mentioned it last week. It is now 1/5 of Americans who are unaffiliated with any religion. Now check this out. Among 20-somethings, it's 1/3. Everybody, 1 out of 3 20-somethings in the United States are unaffiliated with a religion. That's risen 5 points in 5 years. So we're talking about an incredibly rapid acceleration of people questioning their faith to the extent that when they get a phone call from the Pew Research Center, this polling organization, like, you know what, no faith. I don't have any anymore. And it's anymore because 73% of the nones grew up in church. Almost 3 out of 4 of all the people in the United States who say, I don't have any faith. Almost 3 out of 4 grew up in church. And they gave an answer. I mean, Pew asked them why. Why did you walk away, or why are you unaffiliated? And here's what they say. Here's Pew's finding. Overwhelmingly, they think that religious organizations are too concerned with money and power, too focused on rules, and too involved in politics. Is that a shocker to anybody? Because we've experienced those things as well. And in my experience as a pastor, I've seen that the questions and the doubts that unaffiliated people have are eerily similar to the questions and doubts that affiliated people have. Do you know what I'm saying? So there are people in church every Sunday morning who tend to have very similar questions and doubts to people who have walked away from the faith altogether. And so this series is not just about atheists. This series somehow is about all of us in our human condition, kind of looking for what's true and what's right. And we're doing that in a culture that is very loud and polarized. And we have all kinds of voices and sound bites flying at us from different directions. And we're just not sure what to make of it. So I wanted to define some terms quickly. An atheist is someone who does not believe in the existence of God. Atheist is a Greek term. Theos is God in Greek. If you put an alpha, the Greek A, in front of a word, it negates it, like no or non. So it's atheist is atheos, means no God. So that's just, it means I don't believe in the existence of a God. An agnostic, it's another Greek word. Gnostic is knowledge. No knowledge. That means I don't know. So an agnostic would say, I don't know if there's a God or not. And according to some of the best polling we have, 2.4% of Americans are atheists. About 13% of the world's population are atheists, but 2.4% of Americans. 4% are agnostics. 14%, this is all the people who are unaffiliated, 14% believe in God's existence, but are unaffiliated with any religion. So a lot of numbers, right? And to be honest with you, in my experience, it seems like there are more atheists and agnostics than that. I don't know if the halo effect is going on with religious polling and people just kind of give the answer they think they should give, but it seems like there's more skepticism than that. But I've found when I have conversations with people who identify as atheist, agnostic, most of those folks are open. They're open to talking about what's right, what's true, what's best, what leads to human flourishing. Most are not hostile and angry and just iconoclasts and just wanting to tear down religion. Most are open, thinking people. Often, they have come to the beliefs they have because they're people who are empathetic and compassionate. And they've seen a lot of harm done in the name of religion. They've seen a lot of injustice furthered in the name of religion, and they question that. And so their motives for questioning their faith actually sound a lot like good qualities that most Christians would hold up as a great way to live. Love, compassion. And so when I meet somebody who is an atheist or an agnostic or somebody who just says, I have a lot of doubt, I don't feel the need to convince that person otherwise. So the point of this series, and what gets me, some angry mail from time to time from people in the community, is I'm not saying, hey, are you an atheist or are you an agnostic? Let's fix that. Come on into one church and we'll fix that for you. We'll take away all that doubt for you. We're not doing that. I don't feel the need to do that because at the core, perhaps what's motivating lots of atheists and agnostics and skeptics is actually the very qualities we hold most dear. Love, compassion, empathy. We're talking about deep stuff. Are you tracking with me? Are you tracking with me?
Yes.
Okay. Indulge me in my insecurities as I speak. And so, we have a lot in common here and why we're even living the way we are and why we believe the things we do. And so I don't feel the need to try to convince somebody. In fact, in my experience, I've realized that we can actually help each other. My uncle is a great guy, and he lives back in Ohio. He's a supporter of One Church. And he is open about the fact that he has lots of doubts about faith. And a few years ago, he and I would go to lunch together, and he would kind of pick some resources to read through. So he was reading through the works of Spinoza several hundred years ago, a guy who was questioning faith in his time. So we'd have lunch, we'd grab a hamburger and talk about Spinoza. And he's just an open guy. He has lots and lots of doubts that he's honest about, but he's not angry, he's not hostile, he's not attacking, he's open. He wants to talk about these things. He and I might come to different conclusions, but he wants to talk about these things. And at the same time, he's a generous, loving, good guy. And, a teacher in Matthew 22 comes to a teacher of the law, asks Jesus, Jesus, what are the greatest commandments? Like, what's the most important thing about religion? Jesus answers him, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, if a person doesn't believe in God, it's kind of hard for them to love God if they don't believe in the existence of God. But the point Jesus makes there is, the way you love God is by loving other people. Like God doesn't need anything for his birthday. You can't. There's not a whole lot you can give to God. to show love to God. I mean, you can give God thanks and praise in Scripture. We read about that, sure. But those are words. The way you love God, according to the teaching of Jesus, is you love other people. And so if my uncle, even with all of his doubts, and we're reading through Spinoza together, if he wants to love other people, and he does, we share so much in common at the core of our belief system. I mean, the rest is almost periphery. Jesus says in that commandment, all the law and the prophets hang on those two commandments. If you're doing those things, you're fulfilling all that, the Bible's a pretty thick collection of books. You're doing it all. If you're loving God and loving people, you're doing it all. And so we have all that in common already as we, bite into a cheeseburger together. And so why feel the need to convince somebody about something when they're open and they're journeying and they hold what they believe because of love and compassion in their eyes? So, regarding organized religion, it turns out that Jesus and atheists have some things in common. Over the past few weeks, there's been kind of new online quizzes have appeared. I don't know if you've seen any of these things, like where I think we just live in such a polarized culture. Some publishers are trying to point out how much we have in common. And so one of the online quizzes I came across, it was in the news somewhere, is you have a series of statements, and then you have to guess who said these statements. And one of them was, is this North Korea or a TED Talk? So you have like this dictatorial regime in North Korea that puts out their propaganda slogans. And then you have TED, which is like the avant-garde, cutting-edge, leading culture of U.S. society. And you read these statements and you have to figure out which is North Korea and which is TED. And you can see how they start to break down some of the prejudices and assumptions that we have about the various things we say. Obviously, there are differences, but these slogans just kind of reveal something. So you guys want to have a little quiz? Yes. All right. They won't be on the screen, so you just have to listen to these. I'm going to give you 7 statements, and I just want you to shout it out, right? We're informal here. Shout it out if you think this statement was made by the dictatorship of North Korea or if it came from a TED Talk. You ready? All right. First one. Go beyond the cutting edge. North Korea. Good start, right? Okay. Aren't these awesome? All right. Number 2. We are here for knowledge. Our enemy is thoughtlessness. A little split. TED. All right. Half right. Number 3. Do everything in an innovative and scientific way. It kind of sounds North Korean, doesn't it? Like, it sounds like a slogan. Number 4, music is our daily medicine. Split crowd. TED. Number 5, you see the more competitive people among us. Right? Number 5, the frustration builds. Number 5, develop and make effective use of wind, tidal, geothermal, and solar energy. I missed that one, actually, on the quiz. North Korea, good job. Number 6, let us live not merely for today, but for tomorrow. Did you read that somewhere? You were very confident in that answer back there. Oh, nice. He's got a technique. It's good. Why didn't I think of that? All right, last one. You ready? North Korea or TED? Capitalism, at its most remorseless, is a physical manifestation of psychopathy. Boom. You got that one. Nice. So you get the point, right? There were a few that kind of fooled us. So, yeah, there are differences between North Korea and TED, but we also have some prejudices about what we expect people to say. Here's another quiz. These will actually be on the screen, and we'll go through them one at a time. Here's the quiz. Jesus or Richard Dawkins? All right. Jesus or the famous new atheist, so-called new atheist, Richard Dawkins. Now, I had to modify the wording a little bit because the Bible just kind of sounds like the Bible. You know what I mean? Like no matter, so there's no way I could fool you. I mean, Dawkins is a modern communicator and you have the Bible. So I had to modify wording a little bit, but I kept the core meaning of the statement, tried to modify as little as possible. So just kind of keep that in mind. But who made the following statements, Jesus or Richard Dawkins? So number 1, faith is belief in spite of evidence. He's like, it worked the first time. We have a Jesus. Faith is belief in spite of evidence. Kind of split. I heard a lot of Jesus's. Dawkins. Richard Dawkins. Jesus never makes a statement like that, and we will get there, oh, believe me, in a moment. Dawkins made that statement. Number 2, let us teach generosity, for we are born selfish. Shout them louder. Let's hear it. Split crowd, Dawkins, Richard Dawkins. He writes about the selfish gene and survival of the fittest. All right, 3rd, don't do as they do. After all, they say one thing and do something else. They pile heavy burdens on people's shoulders and won't lift a finger to help. Everything they do is just to show off in front of others. Jesus. Sounds like something Dawkins would say, right? Sounds like a guy who's kind of being critical of religion. You agree with that? Yeah. All right, next. Let's go on to the next one. They are good only because they fear punishment and hope for reward. Split crowd, Dawkins, Richard Dawkins, from the God Delusion. Fascinating, isn't it? A little harder than you imagine. Okay, next. On the outside, they appear to people as righteous, but on the inside, they are full of hypocrisy. Jesus. I wonder what the clue was. I mean, I'm sure people just kind of know that. On the outside. Nice. You pick up some of those patterns in Jesus, right? And there's a word in there that we actually have in the English language because Jesus used it, right? Hypocrisy. They? No, hypocrisy, right? All right, next. You hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when you have succeeded, you make them twice as much a child of hell as you are. North Korea, somebody said. Daggone it. Jesus. How many people, show of hands, vote with your hands, how many people are shocked that Jesus made a statement like that? A few. Okay, great. Not the response I was thinking, but that's fine. I found that a lot of people are somewhat shocked that Jesus would make a statement that, I mean, let's be honest, kind of harsh, right? Like, ouch. That Jesus would make a statement about religious people that is that direct, heavy-handed, that passionate, that outspoken, that Frank Schaefer-ish. They're a little surprised that Jesus would say something like this. Here's what we gather from our little quiz, if you're taking notes. Like the new atheists, Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett, Jesus is critical of bad religion. Now, Dawkins might just be critical of religion. In my opinion, I'm interjecting some of my opinion here. I think he's critical of bad religion. I do think there is such a thing as helpful religion. And there's also bad religion. Also a good band name, by the way. But Jesus is critical of bad religion. And we know in our world there are countless examples of horrid harm done in the name of religion. Our news media is right now just enamored with ISIS. But ISIS is a serious injustice that in their world, at least, their words is promoted in the name of their religion. We know of all kinds of oppression around the world. And right here in our culture, the oppression of women in the name of religion. Slavery was defended by some people by appealing to words in the Bible. So we could list all kinds of examples of harm done in the name of religion. So for people who are atheists or agnostics, there are valid intellectual reasons that a person would say, well, I'm going to reject belief. Or I'm just going to at least let the jury remain out. And the new atheists, Dawkins, Harris, Hitchens, Dennett, are naturalists. They expect evidence that appeals to the five senses in order to accept the validity of any kind of a belief statement. And so they're naturalists, and that's valid. Now, at the same time, for lots of people, they have been wounded so much by religion, or they're people who are willing to think clearly enough and ask tough questions. Like if you look around the world where everything is just in shambles, how often is that caused in some way by a religion? Unfortunately, for a Christian pastor, there are lots of examples of that around the world. So there's an intellectually valid argument to be made for a great amount of harm caused by religion. Jesus is very critical of what I would call bad religion. One of those things, I think, is a misreading of some words that Jesus says, and it's just the concept of blind faith. One of the criticisms of bad religion is that it promotes ignorance. That it's like, I'll believe what I believe in spite of the facts. And it's like the more facts that are presented, some people are like, well, no, I just believe all the more now against what the facts say, because it's almost like it's a badge of honor. In spite of all the facts, I still believe. There are folks who see that as a virtue. Blind faith they see as a virtue. Jesus doesn't teach blind faith. Jesus doesn't say that faith is belief in spite of evidence. In John chapter 20, here's the example. It's a post-resurrection Jesus. He appears to his disciples. Thomas isn't there. What's Thomas's nickname? Doubting Thomas. The next week, Thomas is there. And he says, I won't believe until I see the nail prints in his hands and I can touch the scar in his side from Jesus' crucifixion. Jesus appears. And Thomas says, Lord, I believe. And Jesus says, blessed are those who have not seen and still believe. So in context, Jesus is saying, blessed are those who have not seen my physical body post-resurrection, but yet they still somehow believe, give intellectual assent to my resurrection from the dead, which of course there are lots of questions there as we head towards Easter. That's fine. But that's the context of the statement. What Jesus doesn't say is deny all factual knowledge in human discovery. You follow me? You follow what I'm saying there? It's not a general blanket statement that, science is bad. You should argue with your teacher in science class, kids. That's not what Jesus is saying there. Unfortunately, when the Bible falls into the hands of people who are already predisposed to be attracted to ignorance, the Bible becomes a weapon for ignorance. It depends on whose hands it's in. And we've seen the Bible, fall into the hands of violent people, and it's used as a club, of course, right? And so they kind of interpret it the way they want and want to rationalize their own behaviors. Jesus' statement is not a blanket statement that we should believe in spite of all evidence. It's not blind faith. Whenever anybody talks about, well, we should just have blind faith. Well, you didn't hear that from me. You didn't hear that from me. Because Jesus doesn't teach blind faith. In fact, the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 13, what's that chapter called? You hear it at weddings all the time, the love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13. Right after he says, love is patient, love is kind. He says, when I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. That's a good verse that we could use right now in America, isn't it? When it comes to religion in America, I don't think that the New Testament teaches blind faith. I think we're taught to use our brains, and if we're afraid to use our brains, well, that's a big warning sign right there. If you have to believe in spite of using your brain, well, that's a warning sign. You can get people to do all kinds of evil things at that point if they're not allowed to question. Number two, Jesus represents a spirituality that transcends organized religion. That's what we gather. Frank talked about this last week. He gave the example from the Gospel of John chapter 4. It's called the woman at the well. Jesus talks to a Samaritan woman. Jesus is a Jew and a guy. He talks to a Samaritan woman. Men were not allowed to talk to women publicly. In that culture, it was frowned upon. They had two different religions. And as the conversation progresses, we hear Jesus say, when they're kind of debating religion, Jesus says, yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers, people who really want to live a spiritual life and be open to God's work in their lives, when they will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father speaks. God is spirit. It's talking about spirituality. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. They were arguing kind of about the temple. If you remember Frank talking about this last week, and Jesus basically says it doesn't matter where the temple is. It doesn't matter what the building is or the religious structure is. God, and that's a big word, God, but God is a spirit. And God seeks people who will worship God in a spiritual way and in a way that is true to human beings and is true to God's character, regardless of what institutionalized religion teaches. As a matter of fact, the irony for us gathering, as a church on a Sunday morning is that throughout history we've seen this cycle over and over again that churches can talk about Jesus, but they actually end up opposing the work of Jesus. Maybe they start off with good intentions, but then over time, they become these more inward-focused, self-centered, self-preservation institutions. And they find themselves actually opposing Jesus, who criticized organized religion harshly. And so we're kind of in a weird place, aren't we? Where we're a church, but we're talking about Jesus, who has some really harsh words for organized religious leaders who are kind of hypocritical. So we're in this place where we're always uncomfortable if we really want to follow Jesus. We can't get too comfortable in our churchiness if we want to follow Jesus. We're always our eyes are lifted to a more spiritual understanding of God that even transcends our own religion. One example of this, the past 2 weeks I've had the same conversation with two different people. It's just and I feel the same problem in my life. I'm talking about anxiety. And we just live in a really busy culture, don't we? And now we have, all the technology that just helps us pack more stuff in, more busyness in. And in both of these conversations, we were talking about how, you can feel anxious, you're worried, you're just on a roll at work, or whatever you have to do, whatever your responsibilities are, and you find yourself never living presently in the moment. And it's just like whatever you're doing, wherever you are, your mind is always somewhere else. And I'm like, oh man, it's more true than I care to admit. And we were talking about how, one of the greatest challenges in life is to actually live in the moment, to actually live in the here and now, and not be somewhere, but then have your mind somewhere else. And right now, some of us are struggling with that. It's just the truth. We have anxieties and our own stories that we bring in here on a Sunday morning. And one of the greatest spiritual needs in American culture is to live in the moment, to live in the now. And a lot of people think, well, it just kind of sounds like New Age. Like a lot of Christians would even resist that because they've heard, quote unquote, New Age spiritual teachers teach about that. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow has enough trouble of its own. Think about today. And oh, wait a second. Jesus said that a really long time ago. But a lot of Christians aren't open to that because they think that's some kind of spiritual, not spiritual's bad. But you're like, wait, Jesus said that. You know what I'm saying? And so we can get caught up in our own religious institutions and miss out on the spirituality of Jesus that transcends our religion and realize, wait, the core teaching of Jesus seems to be about trust. And people would have different language for that. Some people might say, well, you can trust the universe. You can trust that the universe is on your side. You don't have to live in anxiety and worry. Jesus' language was, you can trust your Father in heaven who loves you. And he cares for the birds. And he clothes the flowers, and they're gorgeous. And they don't worry about their clothing and their food. You don't have to either. How much more does he care for you? It's a typical Jewish argument. How much more does your Father in heaven care for you? And we miss out on that deep spirituality a lot of times because we have all these boxes of, this is Christianity and this is spiritualism. But Jesus represents a spirituality that transcends even our own religion. So, we can find ourselves drawing battle lines between groups of people just because that's what our organized religion tells us to do, but the truth of the matter is our common humanity unites us. Our common temptation to anxiety, our common worries and fears about life and our experiences of life, and all of these religious, holy wars are totally unnecessary. I'm going to interview somebody. Logan Dennison has been a part of 2 worship services at one church already in the past few weeks. He's a grad student at ASU in the film school, and Logan is filming a documentary about the loss of faith in America. And it's his final project in his grad degree program. And so he's been here to interview Kathy Escobar a few weeks ago. We were back at the old place, right? And he's been here to interview Frank Schaefer and shot an extended interview with Frank last Saturday night. And so he's putting this documentary together. And I thought it would be great to invite him back and just hear Logan's story. Give Logan a few minutes just to kind of tell his story about why he's shooting this documentary, why it's about religion, what motivated him to do this. And so I've really appreciated my conversations with Logan, and I wanted you to hear it too. So Logan, come on up, man. Let's welcome Logan Dennison. There you go, man.
Thank you.
So yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being willing to do it. And you're among friends, man.
Thank you.
And we'll get your mic on, apparently. Is it on? Is it on? Let's try again.
Check.
No?
Mic check. We do this when we film every time. There we go. All right.
There it is. Thanks, man.
You can never tell if it's just in your head or not.
Well, I know. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's another problem. It's another discussion.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, what is the project that you're working on? If you would tell everybody about what you're working on. I mean, it's, it's a final project for you, but what is it?
So it is, the title's to be announced yet. However, this is a documentary film project that sort of launched out of my own questions with faith and my own struggle with, the relational tensions that come from doubting to such a degree that, your family, your community thinks you're crazy and, might say you're going to hell over it.
Okay.
And so it actually, I think the structure of the project is actually agnostic itself. I put this call out, an anonymous call online, and found a stranger who answered this call, the exact same thing I just said, someone who had experienced tensions in their faith and tensions in their family because of it. And so this woman and I, Rachel Juneau, she's a single mother of two, we have been going around and having discussions, sort of another agnostic approach, just open conversations with people from the very secular range to very progressive Christians and everything in between, including fundamentalist evangelicals, and trying to really sort of get at the bottom of what it's like to have a conversation and the sort of the struggles to communicate between faith and doubt.
Interesting.
So I've learned a lot about my own faith and doubt in this process, and the idea that the creative process itself is very agnostic if you're sort of being honest with it.
Yeah. And so you're filming these different voices and putting those together and see what happens. Right?
Yeah, and the structure, there's all these, when it comes to making a film, there's tons of different aspects, and usually there's 200 people involved, and I'm sort of hosting and heading up every one of these segments. So I've just finished filming, and now we're in the edit stage. And so, the question is, how are you going to structure it? What's the story going to be like? And for me, it's a real question of how do you retell someone's story? And I think this is sort of at the core of trying to embrace a history saturated in maybe, for instance, the Bible, where you're taking some story and you're trying to find the meaning out of it, and then you're making new meaning. So
right. It's a big project.
Yeah, and there's ethical questions behind it too. I could
sure. Lots on the cutting room floor, but I mean, that's the way a film project goes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So what? You alluded to it slightly, but what is motivating you to shoot your final project on this topic, on the loss of faith, on religion in America? What motivated you to do that?
Yeah. Actually, I've been reflecting on my own personal history the last few months while doing this project, and remembering that I was sort of raised in this non-traditional format where we were church hopping, trying to find the right church because my two parents sort of had different ideas of what was appropriate. And I think that that's at my core, is this idea of challenging and looking for the correct thing. So I think in a lot of ways I was a seeker at a young age. And more than that, when I got old enough to be making these decisions on my own, I remember I was re-baptized when I was 13 at a non-denominational church. And soon after that, I started looking into the Catholic Church. And the people from that church community where I was just recently baptized at started telling me I was going to go to hell if I went to the Catholic Church.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then later on, started doubting the faith as we find it, or that we have been given it. Even when you try to pare it down to getting rid of the religious dogma and just looking at the life of Christ, or feeling the personal life of Christ, and starting to sort of take these larger ideas and move away from organized religion, and yet the same sort of tension
Yeah.
within my own family was just growing stronger and stronger, and this idea that I was that my path was now going downward.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it's a terrible feeling to be told by those that you love the most that you're wrong, and
Yes.
and there's something about that what Frank Schaeffer talked about, that certainty addiction. And when you say to such a degree that I am right and that I fall back on my faith and that my doubts sort of fade to the back because my faith is so strong and I don't need to entertain doubt anymore, then what is coincidentally happening, and what I'm finding in this film, talking to all sorts of people who have left their faith and struggled with relationships because of this, is that inherently when you say I'm right and you're wrong, you're saying that I have power and you don't, that I have truth and you don't, and truth and value is equated to power and righteousness, and that's like, that's sort of, to me, the difference between Jesus talking to the Samaritan woman and Paul telling women to sit down and shut up in church. So it's once again coming back to Schaeffer. He was amazing, and he's going to be a touchstone in the film. And this idea that it is about relationships and it's about a right way to live as opposed to a right set of beliefs. And that's what I'm trying to approach in this film is a relational approach that lets the conversation be comfortable in the middle between doubt and faith.
Yes, it's great. I can't wait to see it.
Me too.
And yeah, right. It's a lot of work for you to get to that point. Yeah. What you just said, and I want to highlight it. You can speak more to it if you want, but what you just said was, paraphrasing, for some people, when they reject doubt in favor of their certainty, it also leads to them rejecting people. Often their sons, their daughters, their siblings, right?
Yeah. In the name of, the most high value according to the voice behind the judgment.
Yeah. And an enormous amount of pain has been inflicted upon people because of that.
Yeah, and the irony and the paradox is that on all sides of the conversation, everyone feels like they have been made the other.
Okay. Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're a believer or a non-believer. Yeah. Everyone feels like they're the minority, and that they're the ones who have the injustice done to them, and that they're the ones who need to rise up.
Yeah.
Looking at the statistics that you just showed, 1/5 of the country now identifies as non-believers, or non-affiliated. I'm sorry. Yeah, and a smaller percentage are non-believers, agnostic, and atheists. And I don't remember where I was going with that, but the idea is that now I'm an agnostic.
Yes.
Now I'm in a smaller percentage. I'm the minority. But what I'm learning in this project is that it doesn't matter who I'm talking to. Yeah. Someone can perceive me as X, Y, and Z and judge me really quickly, even if I thought that I would have identified with this camp.
Yes.
And so another Schaeffer thing is the taking on of a label and the identity is actually debilitating to the ability to stay flexible and grow as relationships require.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're doing is a gift, and I appreciate you sharing out of your own life and the project you're working on, and you have a lifetime to explore these things. And I think I'm looking forward to seeing it because, you've been so professional around here, and in the conversations we've had, you're a deep thinking person, and I deeply appreciate that, man.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Logan Dennison.
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. That was great, man. Thank you. That was great. So, in closing, and then we're going to take communion together in a moment. I want to close like this to kind of lead up to communion. A pastor friend of mine said recently that he visited a church. It's actually Doug Padgett, who's coming on April 12th to speak here. He's who told me this story. He said he was visiting another church, and the pastor was describing his congregation. And he said, in our congregation, we have 3 camps, 3 campfires. In our congregation, we have an atheist campfire. People who say, I just don't really believe in the existence of a God. And then there's another campfire that's a theist campfire. So I believe in something, but I'm just not sure what. higher power, but not defined as the Christian concept. If there is one, there isn't one Christian concept of God, but the theist campfire. And then he's like, we have a Christian campfire. So we have 3 campfires in our church, and all 3 are allowed to burn. And the only rule is, you can't pee on somebody else's campfire. I said, yeah, go. It deserves applause, doesn't it? I'm like, watch how fast I steal that. That's going to end up in a sermon so fast. So what that really is about is love, that I'm going to treat you the way I want to be treated, so I recognize your humanity and where you are and your beliefs. And I'm going to refuse to attack you. Not peeing on somebody is a funny way of saying, I'm not going to attack you. We can have discussions and until they get to the point of attacking, and then we're not going to go there. But like Logan said, we're going to respect the humanity that we have in common, that we're all asking questions. And so many of us feel like we're victimized or alienated, whether it's true or not, but we're going to respect each other.